All right, what's up, everyone? We are back. It's been a little bit of a break. We took last month off, kinda. I mean, we didn't take it off. We definitely were working. We're working a good bit. We've had a lot going on too. For me personally, I just got back from Mississippi. Had a big Bassmaster tournament. Had a good finish there. Moving up in the AOY, good stuff, positive stuff there. Running a bunch of bass trips. Chip's been all over the place as well. He's out there scouting today, some getting ready for some trips coming up, and but we got a lot of information to talk about, especially about Lake Murray, which has done a ton of changes since our last video. And we're going to kind of rewind a little bit, kind of tell you a little bit about what has happened on the lake, and then also what is currently happening, and then kind of project a little bit about what we think is going to happen here within the next week or two as well. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to Chip. Chip, kind of give us a little bit of a rundown on what you've seen of the lake. Obviously kind of dating back to the very beginning of March to where we are currently towards the middle of April.
So, we had such a cold winter this year, a lot colder than we normally do. We had some snow, stuff like that. So we had actually had a deep cold. Our water down below the surface was a lot colder. So in turn, I think that took a while for the water temps to come up. I know the bait guys, they were struggling, on my side of things, the guys that are catching bait for us. Typically by February, they're able to get it out of Murray, and they do not come to the lights. And usually it has something to do with water temp. And then there's moons and stuff like that. But they struggled. But I seen it as well. I kept wanting water temps to come on up out of the 50s, come out, hit that 62, hit the 63, and it just would not do it. It would just, you would think it was supposed to, and you'd come out the next morning, and there it sits at 57, 58. That was all through March and stuff.
Yeah.
Now we had some really good fish in March. I mean, I had two striper wise. I took at the end of March, first couple of days of April, I had two pushing 19, 20 pounds. I mean, several teenagers, 13, 14 pounds. Good fish. They were up shallow. Kind of working on the early herring that we're starting to get up there. As we go where we are right now, we're full blown, herring spawn right now.
Yep.
Seeing a lot of large balls. We can get into that a little bit, but try to keep a little bit short there. Water temps are finally up. It took the whole month of March to get them to come up. We actually had some days we had tons of wind. March and April tend to be real windy in Murray.
Right.
But we had some days that did not have wind, and days that we don't have wind, that water temp will climb. And then the wind comes and mixes it back up. So it's like adding a little bit of lukewarm water to a really cold pot. But it's finally we've got our water temps up. We got our herring spawning now. But it's been good. Everything's been good. Before you're gonna blink your eye and the spring's gonna be gone. We're gonna be here in the summer.
I know.
So
I know.
There's still some time out there to go.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, so, I mean, a lot of what I saw, too, pretty much identical to what you saw, obviously, was we had a March that was kind of characterized by cold fronts, right? We had a ton of cold fronts,
That's
man.
right.
And, the end of February, we had a really good warm front that pushed through. I believe it was, in middle of February. It pushed a lot of fish up towards the bank, being both stripers and bass. And then it's like we just kept having cold fronts, and it would, knock them back, and they were, not 100% up, but they weren't all the way deep either. They were just really kind of hanging out, at least for bass, in that 8 to 15 foot zone, and just staging, hardcore staging, waiting for the weather to stabilize, and then them to finally be able to push up and spawn and do that. So I know that was a lot of what March was, and then obviously now, especially, I had a trip today, water temperature. I mean, some parts of the lake it was 66 this morning, other parts of the lake it was 72. So I mean we're right there around that magic temperature for Lake Murray when, to your point with the herring spawn, everything starts popping off. You get to 68 to 72 degrees on Lake Murray, and it's a really fun lake to fish. So with that, I mean, obviously kind of tell me a little bit about the fishing for striper, and obviously I know you've also got some perch information as well.
Right. So the striper, our heyday, at least my personal opinion, our heyday is really mid-March through mid-April.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we don't get a really warm spell. And all of that transition this year, perfect. Like I said, we've seen several double-digit fish. I personally know of probably 5 20s that were caught
Wow, that's big
in that
striper.
month, in that span of mid-March to mid-April. But as great as it was, this last week was our water temp when it gets in that high 60s. Um, it kind of cuts our fish off a little bit. And what really happens is those big fish that we're catching, those 12 to 20 pound fish, they're females. I mean, there was a 12 pound male caught Saturday on a tournament I fished. But typically, those females, they disappear. They spawn. I know what they're doing. They're going and spawning.
Yep.
I'm surprised the cut baiters should be starting to really see a lot of action. I'm seeing a lot of fish staging in that 20 to 30 foot range. You can be in 180 foot of water and they're sitting 20, 30 foot deep. You can be in 20, 30 feet of water, they're sitting on the bottom. Now, those, and it's textbook spawning. I mean, you'll see one big, nice arch in there and it's covered up by like 15 small arches. But our bite gets a little tougher for big fish. The shorts come out of the woodwork. I'm catching 30 to 50 fish a trip, and we're averaging about 10 to 12 keepers. So we're going through some bait, digging through some fish to catch them. And you can still catch them up at 5 foot of water, and you can catch them out there, lay on the bottom in 30 feet, or just like I said, you can catch them over top of the river channels. Anywhere from Dreer Island all the way to the dam. I was getting a few reports still above Dreer. There's still plenty of fish up there that haven't worked their way down yet. But I'm also starting to see a little bit of a thermocline start up out there. I don't see it. You only see it when I'm in probably, I don't know, 60 to 80 foot of water. But the thermocline's only sitting about 30 foot deep. I thought, and this does it every now and then, I'll see it. But you can go up in like 50 foot of water and it won't be there. But it's only out over top of the channel. So I'm not sure exactly what that is. It looks like a thermocline on the graph, but, it is what it is. Perch-wise, so I put a little video out where I just made a post out there on that Lake Murray fishing. If you've been struggling to find perch on the humps, they're not on the humps. Typically, I can go out on any hump, turn a live scope on it, I can see 5 or 6 crawling on the bottom if I need them for bait or whatnot. But while we were pulling for striper, I'm going point to point to point, and when I would come off from a point and get into a ditch, right before I come back up onto the next point, there they'd be sitting there. And it was in Ballantine, it was in Crystal, it was in Hollow, it was in Beaver Dam. It was everywhere. Everywhere I went, a good backs of the ditches, there sat piles and piles of perch. Never fished them. Never, didn't have time. I mean, striper trips have been running crazy. But if you're looking for perch, get in the backs of the ditches.
So real quick,
the cats.
let
go ahead.
me stop you right there. So that you said a great point. And obviously, I know what perch look like right when I see them on the graph. Explain to everyone. You obviously said you saw them. You didn't even have to fish for them. You knew what they were. What do they look like on the graph?
So, and I always tell people, everybody's graph's a little bit different, and I always tell people you kind of look if there's a bunch of them there, they'll kind of mound up a little bit, but you almost want to look if you're going slow, it's going to be a double bottom. I mean, it's going to be a hard bottom, and then there's going to be something on that. But now, granted, you can get into some soft, silty bottom stuff, and you'll see a double bottom. But this is, once you see it the first time, you're like, oh, that's that double bottom he was talking about.
Yeah.
But I get into a habit now of, I run a 12-inch screen. It's a dinosaur. It's an old one, but I cut it up. I have a map on the little 4-inch. Or whatever it is, 4 or 5 inches, and then I have my little 2D, which I live and die by my 2D. That's just what I live and die by. But I'll have it up there, and then the whole bottom screen is I'll either have side scan or down scan running over the whole bottom. So get into a habit of, and I'm guilty of it. You can ask all my friends. I was never a side scan or a down scan user. I just I didn't need it, so I didn't use it. But in the last 2 years, I have really pushed myself to use it. Just have it turned on. Start comparing. Okay, I know what that is. So this is what it looks like on down scan, side scan, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see it. So when you go across that double bottom or that little mound, it almost looks like bait sometimes. Look at your down scan or your side scan. You'll see each individual fish, and it's just perch that are all balled up.
Yeah. So pretty much it sounds
that's something I always tell.
yeah, pretty much it sounds like two things, right? And a lot of that is posture, right? With how the fish are sitting to the bottom. And then
That's exactly right.
the number of fish that are inside of the school. So they're going to relate close to the bottom. They're likely going to be right next to a drop, and that you're typically going to see multiple fish inside of that school at one time.
Right.
And that's going to really be indicative of what those perch look like on your graph, right? And I mean, it sounds like you have it to where your 2D is so dialed in that you're able to see it. And you're like, oh, that double bottom right there, that's exactly what it looks like.
That's right. That's right.
So
I tell people all the time, and when I'm on my trips, I try to point stuff out like that because I get a lot of guys that want to learn. If I see a school of crappie, and I always tell people, they're like, oh, look at those fish, and it won't be fish; it'll be like a stump or something. But just talking about posture of the fish, those, the perch, they look a lot like small stripers. On your grass. So if you know what a small striper looks like, then perch looks the same way. Crappie, one way to always differentiate the crappie too, is crappie will stack vertical, even when they're suspended. A lot of times on the graph, they will be stacked right on top of each other. Not necessarily symmetrical, but their schools go up on a graph typically. Whereas the perch, they'll be more of a kind of a coned out. And of course, the stripers will be a little bit elongated, if you're moving kind of slow. But you got to pay attention to, if you're running 2D, the thickness of your mark.
yeah, and obviously I know you're telling me too that you've had some catfish as well. What are you seeing with some of the catfish, and have you got any of the striper too? I know obviously that like you were saying, cut bait any day probably for stripers.
Yeah, and most of the I haven't actually been catfishing. I mean, I've seen some on the graphs and stuff like that. And I think and I'm not a hardcore cat guy. I'll catch them in the fall and the wintertime. But, a lot of those fish are starting to spawn as well. And, no one likes to catfish spawn. from what people I hear from people like, man, I'm not even touching the doggone cat during the spawn because they plant, with striper, they'll have some fish that feed this and that, and the same way with bass, I'm sure they'll feed a little bit. But them catfish, when they're spawning, they on their WWE style. They wrestling and fighting, and they ain't eating. But some of the guys I talked to, they're still on channel edges, or they're starting to get up on the flats, up in the shallows a little bit. But yeah, it's just. It's not the greatest time to go out there and catfish. I'll tell you that. You can always tell when the tournaments stop. That's when the
indicator right there.
Yeah, that's the indicator.
But it does sound like there's good striper fishing right now. It seems like you just kind of got to weed through the numbers to get your keepers, but the keepers are there and you can get them.
Yeah, and it's not like we're catching 13, 14-inch fish. We're catching 20 and 7/8. I mean, they're
good
right
fish.
there. So yeah, they give you a great fight. Another month and a half, those things are fish tacos. So it's
right.
It's what everybody's waiting. That's when everybody becomes a guide and everything works out.
Right.
But I was going to chip in a little bit with the bass. So I've been kind of scouting around a little bit, looking at some shallow stuff. Man, I've seen quite a few texts out like, "Hey, man, they're here, and they're here." I mean, you just go through the shallows, and I don't know much about them, but I guess those fish are either doing their thing, or they've already done their thing. I don't know. Some of them I can tell, I kind of see a bed, and they seem to be circling that bed a little bit. But man, they are piled up in the shallows everywhere I went. I mean, there's anywhere I'm seeing them 3 to 5, 6, 7 pounds. There's a there was a good, I mean, I don't know exactly what they look like in the water as far as size wise, but I'm gonna tell you, I mean, that fish was 24, 25 inches long inside the rocks
Wow.
at Dreer. I mean, it was sitting there up and down, and it had probably a 3 or 4 pound buck swimming with it. I
Yeah.
mean, just they were just following each other up and down the rocks. I was like, good night. But
Getting
that's probably when the fish been caught 3 times and released to the rocks, and it just knows she's home.
Yeah, that's Betsy. We've caught her 4 times this year. No, no, no. So yeah, man,
Well,
jumping into the bass side, we have got a ton of stuff to cover for the bass side. I'll try and be pretty concise with it, and so obviously back in March, those fish we had a really good initial spawn, kind of the first couple fish pull up into February, early part of March, before we had those really big cold fronts start coming in, and we had a small spawn then, and that was a lot of the large fish that we had seen, and that was the first ones we saw get out on the herring points, and that's why, there's like a larger tournament trail that came here for a national championship, and they caught some fish off of points, but they kind of ran out of fish too, and that's because that was a really small first group of fish that spawned, and it wasn't the major population of fish, which now, kind of through March, really big, heavy pre-spawn. We're talking grass, we're talking mid-range, we're talking docks, um, even some brush as well. Caught a ton of fish doing that. Had some great days. I mean, we had, I think, multiple 30 plus fish bass days, which is great. I mean, that's really good fishing for Lake Murray. 20 plus pounds, pretty consistently. I would say the big bulk of the spawn happened the first week or two of April. We're kind of starting to be on the tail end of the spawn now. But I mean, we had a huge spawn, like one of the best spawns that we've ever had, I've seen. I mean, you could go into any pocket in any bank and you would see like 10 fish on one row or one stretch of bank. And, we haven't had that in a while. It's kind of been a really spread out spawn to where, you go up there, you'll see a couple on this bank, maybe one or two over here. But to have it to where there's a population of fish, I mean, it just shows a lot about the health of this fishery. And, I'm pretty optimistic about where it's going in the future as well, seeing all the fish that I saw up there spawning. So we had some good spawning trips. Also, really important, there's still obviously some fish on the beds. Be cognizant of it. If you are going to bed fish, make sure you catch that fish. You take a picture of it really quickly. Don't throw it in the live well. Just put it right back so it can go down there and keep spawning. So that part is kind of starting to wrap up. We had a trip today. We did catch one off the bed today. Caught it, quick picture, let it go, went right back to the bed. But the herring spawn has really started full swing right now for us. We're seeing a lot of that, and we're starting to get top water too. If you fish Lake Murray a lot, you know that when the herring spawn, I guess, kind of first starts for bass, we don't really see a lot of topwater action for us. We'll see some striper, but for bass, they're kind of temperamental. You need that like mid to upper 60s before they start doing the topwater deal, and we're just starting to get that. So literally the last couple trips, we've really started to see those fish, schooling on top. They're going after those herring. They're kind of flicking them up out of the water and then going and getting them. A couple really quick tips for that. When you are fishing for those topwater fish, be incredibly, really, really, really precise with your casts. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest mistakes I see my guide clients make is as soon as they come up and they start schooling, they're going to just reel in real quick and then fire immediately over in that direction. Like literally just reel in, take a second, see what direction those fish are moving, and then fire and lead those fish. I'd rather be 1 second late in the perfect spot than right on time 10 feet to the left, and then you don't get that bite, right? I mean, I've seen it. It'll make your catch rate literally go up by like 80%. It's unbelievable. We had another probably 22 pounds today doing that, and it was great. I mean, we're catching a lot of topwater fish. We're catching them on soft plastic jerk baits, the traditional herring fishing stuff, and that's kind of what Lake Murray is right now, and that's what draws so many people in from out of state. I get a ton of calls, ton of messages on Facebook Messenger. What are the fish doing? What are they biting? What are they doing? Right now, it's game time for the herring. Run points. You get around some fish, hang out for a little while, let the fish kind of tell you what they want. Keep changing bait, show them different things, And when they do come up, make sure you're ready. And like I said, take a second, kind of calculate which direction they're going to, lead the fish, put it right in front of them. Perfect cast. They demand perfection here, and you're going to catch that fish. So that's a little bit about bass. That's what we saw in March. That's what we saw during the spawn, and that's what we're seeing now with the herring spawn. And even in the middle of the day, that's one thing about the herring spawn in April is that they will school throughout the day. Whereas in May, that really doesn't happen. Usually it's first thing in the morning, right? So that's a little bit of forecasting of what next month's report is going to be about, is how the timing of bite windows really kind of comes back into play, very, very importantly for bass fishing. But with that, Chip, what are you thinking that the stripers are going to be doing here over the next month or so?
Oh man, I hate May. I really do. May is a transition month, so these fish have been shallow. They're slowly starting to go a little bit deeper now, but they'll still come up and eat shallow, especially in the early mornings. Typically by mid-May, mid to late May, sometimes I'm already down rodding. I don't like to down rod that early. I like to get to about the last week of May before I'm down rodding. But so these fish are eventually, as that water warms, stripers do not want to sit up in that high 70-degree water. They'll tolerate the low 70s and sometimes the mid 70s, but they'll start creeping down lower and lower. And usually their first transition point that I've seen over the last few years is they will go from shallow water to the backs of the ditches. And I think that's because they have access. They can sit in the backs of those ditches and they can come up first thing in the morning. They can eat up on top of the flat or the hump or whatever, the shallow water. And then they can fall right back off into those ditches. I've seen the herring do that too, especially down around Goat, Spence, Pine. The herrings up there, if the herring's already done their thing and they're starting to come off for some reason, they pile up in the ditches before they go wherever they go in the summertime. But sometimes I can't even find the herring in the summertime. It's just weird. But I'm gonna tell you this: that's why a lot of the bait guys, they go to other lakes in the summertime. In the wintertime, the Murray herring just disappear. I don't know if they go sit in the bottom of 100 foot of water or what they do, but they just that's why I'm sure in May and even June y'all start seeing the thread fins. Start keying on a thread fin bite versus the herring bite. And we do the same thing too. So be prepared for that come May. Some people think just because the herring are done spawning that it's over, but there's a late threadfin spawn. The threadfins always spawn after the herring do. So that's something to be looking forward to. A lot of people like to run down lake. They think once those fish are down there around Pine and the dam and Spence and Ballantine, don't forget. There are a lot of fish that are still up around Dreher, Hollow, Crystal, that don't go down there, and that's where you'll get on a threadfin bite. Just spawning threads, and the threads will be spawning the same place the herring did. They're just a little bit later. The Hollow Creek is really good for a spawning threadfin bite. Same way with Beaver Dam. I usually spend a lot of time in Beaver Dam, Goat Island, Ballantine in May. And I'm just watching. Usually my magic number is when I'm waking up and I get to the ramp and the water temp is like 70, 77, 78. But that's in the early morning. That's the coldest it's going to be. I'm going to start looking for those fish in 35 to 50 foot of water sitting on the bottom. Those are just easier fish to catch versus a fish that's moving around. I always tell people I'm not a suspended fisherman. You take a suspended fish, and you'll hear this over the next couple months. I'll say this again. You have a fish that's suspended, they are not relating to anything. They're just there. They're swimming. They're moving. If you find a fish that's on the bottom, he's relating to something. Whether it's, all of this underneath Murray used to be old farms and stuff. It might be a spring. It might be an old building foundation. I've had bass fishermen tell me a crawfish don't go deeper than 20 feet, but I've caught them in stripers' bellies 60 and 70 foot deep. So it might be a crawfish bite that they're on in 60 foot of water. It might be a spring. So I always try to find fish that relate to the bottom, and that's something I'll be looking at as we progress into May. Find fish on the bottom, whether it be in the ditches or be on the humps. But that's kind of what I'm gonna start looking for another few weeks.
Yeah, and pretty much for the bass side as well. We're going to have a lot of the same stuff. It's a lot of schooling fish. It's going to be a lot of fish that are, especially first thing in the morning. They're still going to be doing the schooling activity. Right now, they're kind of towards the very land side of points. As that water temperature warms, they're going to move out further and further and further to the buoys. And kind of use that point as a transition to be able to get from that shallow water all the way out to more of those summertime deep water, spots that those fish are going to be getting in the upcoming months. So that's kind of what we're looking for on the bass fishing side as well.
Yeah, last week there was a pretty good size object. I don't know if it was a log or a tree limb or something. It was floating on between the big gap and the little gap in that stretch right there.
Yeah.
But overall, everything's been pretty clean.
Yeah.
Now there may be some stuff up late, but I ain't been up late in a while.
Right.
But for the most part, we should be pretty safe on that stuff. Trying to think. Well, it's that time of year, so y'all just also pay attention to kids on tubes and jet skis and stuff like that. I mean, I've had them already jumping boat wakes and stuff like that. I mean, don't let them get under your skin. Everybody's entitled to their chance on the water, but just, the best thing you can do to, avoid an accident is for you to be safe. If that means you taking the upper higher road and doing something that, who cares if you had right away? If it means 100%. Saving an accident by you doing something to prevent it, do it. Just be the better person about it. Yeah. Just be safe out there, because it's around the corner. Like I said, I've already seen a lot of stuff going on out there. It's Lake Murray. It ain't the old Lake Murray. We got tourism and everything else now.
Yeah, and that's where safety, obviously, we've seen a bunch of different stuff around the country lately here with boating, and we definitely want to make sure that Lake Murray stays safe, and it's very important, obviously, for us to make sure that we're very aware too, because there is a lot of boat traffic right now. A ton of people out on the water. I had a trip on Saturday, and man, it's like a zoo, you know what I mean? So that being said, be very, very cautious with it. But other than that, I really don't have anything else to add, other than, obviously, if you haven't subscribed, liked the channel yet, definitely do that. And I've also been working with Chip a little bit behind the scenes. I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit, doing almost like some type of this is obviously going to be and continue to be some free information. We're grateful that we get to do this for a living, so we want to give back, at least to give you a chance to understand what we're seeing, kind of on a daily basis. But there is an advanced level that some people have kind of reached out to us and been wanting, as far as a little bit about what we talked about with sonars, right? What do the different types of fish look like on your sonars? How do you find these fish, pattern these fish, figure out how wind and different weather conditions affect these fish, and how you need to present your baits differently, how to make changes to the baits when you have, let's say, a cloudy day versus a sunny bluebird sky day. So that's something that we're working on in the background. Don't really have a date set for anything like that yet, but I have had a good bit of feedback that that's something that we're looking at. So good chance we'll be doing something like that. I've started to make a couple phone calls on it. So with that, Chip, what else do you have to add?
Well, I'm going to piggyback there on you a little bit. You can only get so much info, us talking like this, but it's something y'all really should probably think about. We can go into so much more depth, but that depth is our living, but that type of stuff is where there's some really good key features. We talk about the backs of the ditches, say, for the perch or this and that, but being able to actually show someone, look, this is the type of stuff we're looking at on a map, or just a lot more detailed info. There's a lot more that can be shared out there, and it's something for everybody to think about. It could be really worth your while.
Yeah, but essentially it's just it's a guide trip for people who don't really want or need guide trips, right? They just really
Well,
want a really
that's a
solid
great.
starting point. Really, they don't need an 8-hour guide trip. It's just, hey, this is what we're looking for. These are some of the baits. I've got the boat already, and I just need to know where to start and how to go. And that's something that obviously, our schedules and all. Sometimes it's kind of tough, but that's something that we can do that'll really help a lot of people out. But that's something, like I said, that's in the future. We're still working on that. That's not for sure 100% yet, but it is something that we're thinking about, and I think that it might be something that's helpful. We've seen that kind of helpful. But yeah, that's what we got for you this month. Sorry it was a little bit late coming out. I know. March and April were kind of the busiest months, and we didn't do one for March. But that being said, we tried. We did try, Chip. We tried to do it. I recorded it. There was no volume. I was at JC's Outdoors. I went to one of the offices. Yep, and there was no volume, so it just didn't work out. I didn't have my laptop. I was in between guide trips. But
that's right, because it was raining that day.
Yeah. We took like a little 1-hour break because it started like thundering and raining and kind of let the front pass through.
Because I had a group of individuals and half of them canceled. So I told the other ones, I said, we're not going. And then it ended up being like a great day, other than like that late morning just kind of blew out. But yeah, I remember that day. I was sitting there. I enjoyed that day off. That was probably the last day I had off, honestly. Other than yesterday for Easter.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's been hectic lately. But that's a good thing, man. I'm super grateful for it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's what we got for you guys. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Looking forward to next month. Enjoy the water. Be safe out there and go catch them up.